So, Amanda, when we sat down to plan this episode, we did have a completely different title. We were going to call it Death by a Thousand Cuts. And if you're a private landlord right now, you know exactly why that came to mind. It's a feeling of another rule, another tax change, another thing to deal with. Each one on its own, fine maybe, but you can imagine everything together just starts to feel a little bit heavy.
I know. But you changed the title though.
I did change the title because the more I looked at the data, and there's a lot of data in this episode. I think this is going to be our last economics type politics episode because I feel like Gary's economics.
But better.
But better. But the more I realize the cuts are random, you get a cut, bad luck. What's happening to private landlords right now just isn't random. You know, there's a pattern, and once you see a pattern, you can't call it a series of cuts anymore.
That's true. So what do we call it then?
Gaps, 4 of them. And if you're a private landlord in England and Wales, you're falling into all 4 at the same time. That's what we're going to talk about today. So the title is Mind the Fucking Gap.
Oh my God. So basically a gap is a really big cut.
A huge cut.
A gouge.
A huge cut.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's get down to it.
So Death by a Thousand Cuts is still in our subtitle. That's still the text of what we're talking about. And it stays there because it's still the best description of what is actually happening to us from the inside. Section 24, stamp duty changes, renters' rights, EPC requirements, the tax changes coming next year, which people possibly have forgotten. Any one of those you can deal with. But the point I'm trying to make today is that the cuts aren't separate things. They just happen to be landing all at the same time. They're part of something bigger, something with some shape to it.
I know. And the shape is basically the 4 gaps. So let's go through those 4 key gaps.
Yeah, the shape is the 4 gaps: the budget deficit gap, the equality gap, the tax gap, and the philosophy gap. And I want to go through each one clearly today because I think, especially the last one, most people in property aren't talking about at all.
And what do you think that's going to be the hardest one to talk about?
Yeah, I think so, but we'll still go through in order. And the word gap is in and of itself not something that is aggressive. It's just a bit of a space. But if you're forced and pushed into these gaps and you can't climb out of it, and I think what we're trying to get over to our landlords, be aware, look for solutions. At the end of the day, at the podcast, we talk about what you can do about these gaps. Then forewarned is forearmed, basically.
As best we can. Okay, let's go for it then.
Right, so the first one, gap 1, it's the most concrete. It's one you can follow by just following the money, basically. The government has a hole in its finances. We've said this before. It needs to fill that hole. It has to decide where it's going to get the money from. And now when you're making that decision, you need 2 things: enough people to go after and an easy way to collect. Private landlords tick the first box really quite easily. There are hundreds, thousands of us, and the rental income we generate is taxable. But the second box, actually collecting it efficiently, that's where we became a bit of a problem.
And why is that?
I think because we're all over the place. Some landlords are professionally run. Some have one property and keep their records in a drawer. The tax are individuals, all with different setups, all at different scale. It's expensive, it's inconsistent. Now, if you compare that with big build-to-rent companies, institutional landlords, you can call them, they pay corporation tax through a single company. One set of accounts, one return. From where the government's sitting, that's much cleaner, a much cleaner transaction.
So the institutions are basically easy to tax?
Yeah, much easier. And here's where it gets really interesting. And this is real because I checked the source before we recorded today. In February this year, That's 2026. An organization called Border to Coast Pension Partnership made a £70 million investment into 139 rental homes in Cambridge.
Okay, so what is border to coast? I've never heard of those guys.
I mean, I went down a rabbit hole on this one.
Oh no, holding company after holding company.
They're the UK's largest local government pension scheme.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, to hold that thought, local government pension scheme, meaning the pension pot that exists to pay council workers their retirement. And they've just put 70 million of that money into building rental housing. How about that for irony? They're part of a fund that's now attracting 2 billion from pension schemes covering 1.1 million council workers, all going into the residential rental sector with government encouragement.
I think whilst innately we probably knew some of that stuff was going on, to think that the very people that are on the streets championing anti-landlord, anti-rental property, anti-everything investment, and their pensions actually getting paid by those assets. So basically public sector pension money is going into being a landlord.
One rule for one rule for the other. Yeah. It means that the government isn't just fine with institutional landlords taking over from private ones. It has a direct financial reason to want that to happen. When a private landlord sells up, a big institution buys. That institution grows, generates returns, and some of those returns end up in the pension pot that pays council workers when they retire. The government has skin in the game.
I'm still actually taken aback a little bit on that.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it? I just want to be clear. I'm not saying this is a conspiracy where someone sat in a room and planned it. It might have been that. It might just be that a series of decisions made for different reasons all happen to point in the same direction.
Surprise.
But for the individual landlord, it doesn't matter which one it is. The result is exactly the same.
Yeah. A little bit of conflict of interest, I think, would be the most politically correct phrase, but I think something larger at play.
It doesn't matter what government, it doesn't matter what business, it doesn't matter what scam, what fraud, what conspiracy, always follow the cash.
Follow the money.
Always follow the cash.
Yeah.
So look, Section 24 in 2016 removed mortgage interest relief for individual landlords. That's billions and billions of pounds recouped every year.
Yeah.
The stamp duty surcharge added 5% to every buy-to-let purchase. The Renters' Rights Act has created a real compliance cost for small operators who don't have legal teams. And more is coming in 2027 on capital gains and inheritance. Every single one of those hits the individual landlord harder than the institution, and not by accident.
Yeah.
Because the individual and the institutions are just built differently. That's the budget deficit gap.
And the Treasury wins either way.
Either way.
Okay, so on to gap number 2 then, the equality gap.
Yeah, and I do have a thing about equality, inequality. So this is quite an interesting one. So let me just say something that might surprise you coming from a landlord. The government's argument here isn't actually that wrong. I'm going to give them that before I explain why the consequences have still been pretty damaging to us as landlords.
Okay, that's not something I expected you to say today.
Yeah, look, I think intellectual honesty matters. You got to call a spade a spade. The post 2006 changes, Section 24, the stamp duty surcharge, was sold as a way to help first-time buyers. And the data says they actually worked to a point. An independent housing research body called the Joseph Rowntree Foundation found that roughly 1 million more households have bought their first home since the reforms than would have done without those reforms. 1 million people who own their homes now and might not have done. That's real. I'll be honest. I don't think you can dismiss that.
If the figures are right, and let's go based on those stats are right, then it's done what the policy is said it was set out to do, which we're okay with that.
At the top end, yes, private landlords with the interest-only mortgage were able to borrow in ways that ordinary buyers couldn't.
Yeah.
And that was generally pushing up prices and making it harder for people to buy their first homes. The reforms addressed that, so credit where credit is due.
But
But they create a much bigger problem at the other end. Typical government. Because while 1 million people moved into home ownership, there are a lot of people who aren't anywhere near that yet. And they need somewhere affordable to rent while they get there. And that affordable rental stock has totally collapsed.
I know it's totally collapsed, but like how badly?
The number of rental homes available for under £1,000 a month, the affordable end of the market, looking at the whole country, fell from 740,000 in 2020 to under 465,000 in 2023. That's more than a third of all affordable rental homes gone in 3 years.
So where did they go?
Landlords sold up because the finances stopped working at that end of the market. A landlord with a small property, renting for, let's say, £650 a month in a Midlands town, is running on very thin margins after the mortgage cost charges, after Section 24, after new compliance requirements. And at some point, the numbers just don't add up.
Yeah.
And the property goes on the market. Sometimes a first-time buyer gets it, which is the intended outcome, and that's fine. We talked about that already. But the tenant who is living there, who can't buy yet, who needs, let's say, another couple or 3 years, what do they do? Where do they go?
Yeah. Well, they basically fall into the gap.
Into the gap. The equality gap isn't between people who own and people who rent in some general sense. It's specifically between the renters who were close enough to buying that the government's policy helped them and the ones who are now nowhere near to it.
Yeah.
Who are now competing for a third less affordable stock than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The policy helped one group and made things considerably harder for the other group. And nobody's talking about the second group enough.
Because they're now looking for the same sort of property but paying more and finding it harder to afford that. And what we don't also hear people talking about is that when a tenant is asked to leave a property because it's going on the market, a third of those properties don't even sell. They just linger on the market for 6 months, 12 months, even vacant. So that person's trying to find another property. This hasn't yet sold to the first-time buyer that you speak of. There's probably a third of properties that are just maybe even empty, or I don't even know what's going on with those.
And here's the interesting thing. The government has said, if you decide to sell your property, right,
Now,
so you decide to take it out of stock, maybe it goes to a first-time buyer, which is a tick for the government. But let's say the property doesn't sell.
Yeah.
You can now not re-rent that property for 12 months. So what does a renter do? There's another property that is not on the market.
Can't be rented.
Yeah.
You say it's not a conspiracy, Paul, but it's smelling like one. It's certainly
I think
smelling
exactly happening.
So, okay, let's go on to gap number 3, which is the tax gap.
Right, gap 3. This one makes landlords the most angriest, I think, when they certainly understand it. And I think a lot of landlords don't understand it clearly. It's not a complicated idea, but the way it's usually explained makes it sound like it is complicated.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Go on.
Here's a simpler version. Say your tenant pays you £1,500 a month in rent, and your mortgage on that property costs you £1,000 a month.
Yeah.
Most people would say you've made £500. That's the money you actually received after you've paid your biggest cost, the mortgage.
Okay, that's how most people think about it, yeah.
Section 24 says, no. Section 24 says you've made £1,500 and your tax on that £1,500. That the £1,000 that went straight to your mortgage lender, the money that was never really yours, HMRC treats it as if it were your income. You get a small tax credit back, 20%. But if you're paying the higher rate of income tax, that credit doesn't cover what you owe.
Yeah.
You end up paying tax on profit you never actually had in your hand.
And even though this has been going on for so long, it still sounds unbelievable. And it's like we've all got used to it now, so we've stopped talking about how unbelievable it is. It is awful.
Yeah. And it is. It's been in place since 2016.
That's like 10 years.
Yeah. Now, contrast that with how a big build-to-rent companies tax. They pay corporation tax, 25% on their actual profit. After every cost has come off, including financing costs, including the equivalent of the mortgage. They pay tax on what's left.
Yeah.
The individual landlord is taxed on what's coming in. The corporation is taxed on what's left. Same business activity, completely different tax treatment.
Yeah. And people have been moving more properties to companies and now buying in structures. But how many people have still got those personally owned properties? It's just not a level playing field.
It's difficult to convert into it.
I know it is.
And very expensive.
I know.
Every time there's been a change since 2016, we've been told it's leveling the playing field. It's not, it's a lie. The field tilts the same way every single time, away from the individual and towards the institution. Some landlords have responded by moving their properties into limited companies, as you've just said, because company tax rules are better. That can work, but it costs money also. Stamp duty on the transfer, legal fees, ongoing admin. And for a landlord with one or two properties, it often just doesn't make sense.
So basically, the bigger you are, the better you're equipped to handle it.
Every time. And the numbers show what happens when the math stops working for small operators. In 2024, 26% of private landlords sold at least one property. 26%. The highest proportion ever recorded, 290,000 rental homes left the private rental sector in 1 year. That's 6% of the entire sector gone in 12 months.
It's staggering.
It is. And it's happening because people suddenly don't want to be landlords. It's happening because the tax treatment has made the numbers stop working. That's a tax gap.
And that's just not, it's 290,000 that have left. And I would love to know what the figure is for those that, let's say, haven't bought. So let's say every year, a couple of 100,000 entered the market. People aren't entering like they used to. So not only you've got people leaving, you haven't got as many people entering. And like you said, not all of those have gone to these perfect first-time buyers.
Absolutely.
So gap 4, which you said was going to be the hardest one, the philosophy gap.
Yes, gap 4. This is one I find hardest to talk about, not because the argument is complicated, it's actually the simplest of the 4, but because it's personal. And I'm going to try to stay calm about it while I talk about it.
Can't promise that, but let's see how it goes.
I know. So here's the thing. In British politics and British culture right now, there is a genuine mainstream belief that building personal wealth through property is a bad thing. Not through pensions. Everyone thinks pension saving is good. Not through owning a business that's generally admired. Not even through the stock market. Specifically through owning a property that someone else lives in and pays you rent. That's the thing that's now seen as a problem.
And you think that's unfair, is what you're saying?
I think it's a massive oversimplification with damaging consequences. For 40 years, from the late 1990s onwards, property was how ordinary people built something for their retirement. Not people with financial advisors and stock portfolios. People had a bit of money saved, bought a second property, found a tenant, and built something over time. It wasn't glamorous. It required work, midnight phone calls, boilers, difficult conversations. Sometimes they had to renovate the properties. But it was accessible in a way that most wealth building isn't. And now that's been described as if it's the same as a corporation extracting money from communities.
Is there any fairness in that criticism at all, do you think?
Look, some landlords behave badly. Some still do. You get that in all sectors. And they should be held accountable for that. But we've gone from some landlords do bad things to being a private landlord is inherently bad. Those aren't the same statements. And when policy is built on the second one, it produces kind of damage we're seeing in the rental market right now.
Yeah. And then meanwhile,
and this is the bit that I cannot get past, the government is directing the pension savings of 1.1 million council workers into the build to rent sector. Through that company, that organisation, Border to Coast Pension Partnership, we talked about that in Gap 1. The same government that says individual property investment is a social problem is actively putting public money into institutional property investments. There is no principle that explains that difference. There's only politics.
and I'm sure it's not only going into social housing, affordable housing. I'm sure it's going into just typical private rented sector because that's where the rents are and that's where the returns are for the pension fund.
It's in Cambridge. It's not in Scunthorpe. was in Cambridge.
Yeah, they chose that strategically, shall we say. So maybe even students, who knows?
And the reason I call it a gap is because there's a gap between what the government says it believes that the housing market should work better for ordinary people and what it's structurally building towards, which is a rental market owned and run by large institutions. That gap is real and it's getting wider and wider.
Yeah, it's a worry.
I think that worries me most, more than taxes, more than the legislation, is what it's doing to landlords' own thinking. I talk to landlords regularly who are still financially viable, still operating well, and they've stopped believing they're allowed to be doing what they're doing. They apologize for it. They don't invest in their properties because growth feels like it's not allowed anymore. They sell when the numbers still work, not because the business is failing, but because the culture has told them they shouldn't be there.
And I guess that's the most dangerous gap of all.
Yeah, because it's the only one that's inside your own head, and no legislation can put it there or take it out. The narrative actually does that.
Well, funnily you mentioned Gary's economics earlier. I actually saw him at like a book launch that he was doing, and I asked him about his level of investment into property. And he's fairly direct in his answer. And he said, like, yeah, I got a bunch. He wasn't apologising, funnily enough, for his rental property. But I guess some of us are just made to feel so bad by the government. But I think we should just make a stand, like, we're not apologising. We're providing a service and we're going to stand by it.
Yeah, indeed. So 4 gaps: budget deficit, equality, tax, philosophy, all happening at the same time. And the question I get asked most by landlords who work with us, what do we actually do about it?
And the answer isn't sell everything at all.
The answer is absolutely not selling everything. And I want to make that case with some history because I think it's most useful, a thing I can offer in these circumstances. In the 70s, we talked about the 70s in the last podcast. The last time this kind of sustained political pressure hit private landlords in this country, rent controls, security of tenure, legislation, all of it, a lot of landlords sold. And the ones who sold destroyed their wealth, the wealth of their families, and they couldn't get that back. The ones who held on, albeit through teeth, adapted how they operated and kept going out the other side in a position that nobody who exited could match. That's a consistent pattern across different industries and different eras. The people who understand what's changing and build for it do better than the people who run from it.
Yeah, we've always believed it, but holding is the strategy.
Yeah, and thinking long term, as painful as it can be sometimes. So holding on with intention is the strategy. There's a difference between staying put because you can't be bothered to think about it and making a clear decision that you're here for the long term and building for that. The first one is drift. The second one is a beachhead, I call it. You hold ground, you build from it, you operate from a position of genuine capability rather than just reacting to whatever comes next.
What does that actually look like in practice then?
It looks like running the compliance properly, not scrambling every time something changes, but having it built into how you operate. It looks like tenant relationships that are genuinely good and not just transactional, because that matters more than now that tenancies are periodic. And it looks like using tech to do things that used to require people, because the level of operational complexity that landlords are now expected to manage is the kind of thing that used to require a team. And most small landlords just can't afford a team.
They can't. Which is where we introduce AI.
Yeah, and we're going to have a separate podcast later on in the year about all the things that we're doing. But for us, it's Stan, Reggie, Mabel, Alma to start off with. And what we've been building, documenting through the transformation years, we've called it, is a way for a small operator to have the same communication capability, the same compliance oversight, the same operational consistency as a large institution, without the headcount cost of a large institution, though. We're not doing this because AI is interesting, although I'm a bit of a geek. We're doing it because the alternative, trying to manage this level of complexity with 15 people and no technology, just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's come across at the perfect time, really, hasn't it?
Very much so.
And we're sharing it publicly.
Yes, we are. We are sharing it publicly because we think other people should be able to do the same. That's what the advisory work is about. Not telling people what to do, but showing them what we actually built, what worked, what didn't, and letting them decide what's relevant to the situation.
So let's think this through. Oh, by the way, you missed out Stacey. I hope Stacey's not listening. You missed out AI agent Stacey. She's probably picked up on that message. So who are AI agents for? If you're a landlord listening to this and you're thinking, is AI for me? Who is it for?
And you were there when I gave the speech to the team in terms of AI coming for us. They're coming for everybody. They're coming for everybody, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think if you're serious about running your property business, you've got a bunch of properties, and you want to do it in an efficient and compliant way, there are ways to do it cost effectively. And just like when Microsoft launched Microsoft Office and they had Excel, they had Word, and they could save it and they could cut and paste and things like that. And all the things, this is great compared with the typewriter or the word processor that follow that. This is great. When the email came along on the back of the internet and you could pay things online by credit card and people were a little bit skeptical, all of a sudden, right, says, what did we do before Amazon came along? You know, Tesco shopping and all that sort of stuff. This is the next iteration of that, whereby we'll be able to do things quicker, cheaper, with greater quality and with greater care and not miss a beat. So this is potentially for anybody that's in property. And we're talking to a lot of people at the moment who are just asking questions. And we're happy to answer. We're not selling anything at this point in time. We're just happy to share and talk people through things and exchange ideas.
Yeah, because our industry needs it. We need it to protect the margins and protect our businesses, don't we?
So, to close, what's the manifesto?
All change at this station, all change, mind the gap.
Mind the fill in the blank gap. That announcement has been playing on repeat for the private landlord since 2016. You can get off, and plenty have. 290,000 of them sold in 2024 alone. 26% of landlords sold at least one property that year, the highest proportion ever recorded. We're staying on the platform.
Yeah.
We're staying on the platform, not because the gaps aren't real, they are, all four of them. And they're getting wider and wider. So not because the cuts have stopped, they haven't. And there are more coming, but because we have seen this movie before in other industries, in other climates, and the people who stayed and adapted, and I stress on that word adapt, always come out ahead of the ones who ran away, always.
I'm not sure if we're staying on the platform or if we're staying on the train, but either way, we're not falling down the gap.
Absolutely.
Either way, we're not falling down the
Absolutely.
gap.
You know, we're building an AI-powered operation that gives us institutional grade capability without the headcount cost. Where we're seeking to professionalize every single part of the business. We're documenting publicly because we believe other operators need to see this, copy it, get ideas from it, talk to us about it. So if you're a landlord or a property operator listening to this and you're carrying the weight of what is coming, you're not alone. The decisions in front of you are real and they're significant, but they're not impossible with the right information and the right tools.
We're always open. Send us a message, send us an email, send us a social media message. We're certainly not selling a dream, but we do want to share what's actually working to protect everyone in our industry. So take care, everyone, and see you on the next episode.